How's it going, folks? Welcome back to WrestleRant right here on the channel where I review every pay-per-view that I watch in the WWE Network. After a very successful WrestleMania season, reviewing every WrestleMania from 1 through 30, and if you haven't checked those out, go back and do so right here on the channel. Going forward for the next month or so, I will be reviewing all the Backlash events as seen right here on the WWE Network. The only Backlash event that I reviewed here on the channel last year was the 09 installment, so I'm going to be reviewing that. I'm going to be watching that back anyway in the next couple of weeks, but I have not watched any Backlash event in its entirety other than that one, so I'll be reviewing each of them here on the channel for the next couple of weeks, so I look forward to that. So that is something to look forward to, and from there I'll be talking about Extreme Rules and Judgment Day, Money in the Bank, Payback, and all these other pay-per-views from the last 10, 15, 5 years. So I look forward to reviewing each of those going forward. So this show itself, Backlash 1999. And I mentioned this in my WrestleMania reviews, but I don't know, maybe it was just me, but the WrestleManias from the Attitude Era, arguably the hottest period in wrestling from 1997 to 2001, they weren't that great. Those WrestleManias 13, 14, 15, and 16, with the exception of 17, which pretty much closed out the Attitude Era, were not great WrestleManias. They had a few good matches here and there, like, Austin and Hart from WrestleMania 13. 14, it was Austin and HBK. 15, Austin and Rock. And 16, the lone triangle ladder match. Those were the only good matches, in my opinion, from each of those respective WrestleManias. The rest of those cards were not too great, if you could pick up on that in watching my old WrestleMania reviews. However, the Backlash events, on the other hand, were stellar. I thought, as of right now, I've already watched 1999, 2000, which will be up here in the channel tomorrow, and 2001, I've watched most of it. I'm up to the main event. But, these events in their entirety have been awesome. Much better than WrestleMania. So maybe that's just me, but I don't know. I enjoyed watching Backlash over WrestleManias from this period in time. I thought they were all stellar. But kicking it off, though, Backlash 1999, known at the time as Backlash in Your House. But the pay-per-view itself, though, kicked off with the Ministry of Darkness, consisting of Farouk, Bradshaw, and Mideon, the acolytes, Bradshaw and Farouk, taking on the Brood, Edge, Christian, and Gangrel. Pretty good matchup. I mean, most of, the tag team division throughout most of the Attitude Era was very, very stacked. This was only a prime example of that with the Brood, the Ministry of Darkness, going out having a really, really good matchup. The Brood was never the greatest faction of all time. I know WWE Countdown likes to credit as such, given their amazing entrance music, and I'm not denying that, but the faction itself was never amazing. They were pretty short-lived before Edge and Christian kind of broke out into their own, as we would see the following year at Backlash 2000, after, their amazing triangle ladder match at WrestleMania. But still, though, pretty good matchup for the most part. Edge and Christian in the ring was cool to watch, with them doing most of the in-ring work. The Acolytes were always a great team. So the Ministry of Darkness, which this show is pretty much circled around for the most part, a lot of members of the Ministry of Darkness were kind of scattered throughout the show, but it was still a good match to kick off the show. Backlash 1999. Up next for the Hardcore Championship, Al Snow defeating Hardcore Holly. Your typical hardcore brawl that I really, really enjoyed. I always thought Hardcore Holly, watching it back, having grown up as a wrestling fan starting in 2008, which is nothing compared to most of you guys that have been watching forever. Hardcore Holly was never really anything special to me. And even, going back even a little bit further than that to his days in ECW in 06 and 07 and 08, he was never anything great. But then I watched back these pay-per-views from the Attitude Era, and the guy was awesome. He had the full package, he had the look. And I know I kind of laughed, I kind of scoffed at the idea of him contending for the WWE title against Brock Lesnar at the 04 Royal Rumble. But, years before that, the guy was really, really good. Never world championship material, but as a nice mid-card act during the Attitude Era when you had so many stars arising, he was really, really good. He had the full package, and I thought, his match here with Al Snow was really fun. They took it all over the place. Al Snow eventually came out victorious as the Hardcore champion, head in hand. And I did say that correctly, head in hand. And, I said this in the past about in reviewing older WrestleManias, but the head gimmick was so over. With that crowd, what does everybody want? Head, and they would chant head, bringing out the head with him. I thought it was, it's a stupid gimmick. It's something simple, but the people ate it up. It was hilarious, and for that reason alone, I thought it's a guilty pleasure of mine. And watching back these these Backlash Attitude Era pay-per-views. I thought it was great. The gimmick itself, not that. I know someone's going to misconstrue that to think that that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the character itself. Get your head out of the gutter. Get your mind out of the gutter. So good stuff there. Up next, the Intercontinental Championship. The Godfather defending against Goldust. Goldust at this time still paired with the Blue Meanie. I think Ryan Shamrock, something had happened to her. I think she disappeared in the Ministry of Darkness. I know as they reviewed in my WrestleMania 15 review, she was kind of the center of focus in that Fatal 4-Way Intercontinental title match with Road Dogg and Ken Shamrock and Goldust. And I believe there was someone else in that match, and maybe it was Godfather. I feel like there was someone else. I forgot who it was. But, she was nowhere to be seen during this matchup. It was only Blue Meanie at ringside. It was what it was. Goldust has always been a really good worker. Godfather, not so much. But the Ho Train, that whole gimmick has always been hilarious to me. So it was what it was. Godfather came out victorious, still the Intercontinental Champion. More tag team action up next with the New Age Outlaws, Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, taking on Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett, and a number one contenders match for the WWF Tag Team titles. So a really, really good match. I believe this was Owen Hart's final pay-per-view, so it was kind of sad in that respect. I believe this was in April of 1999. Let me just double check here. Pretty sure, yeah, April 25th, 1999. He would pass away the following month at Over the Limit. During that pay-per-view before he even made his entrance, obviously, or during his entrance, unfortunately. But, that said, I believe this was his final pay-per-view before his passing. So it was kind of depressing in that respect. With the match itself, though, you take away that aspect of it. I mean, Owen Hart was always an amazing worker. I've said that time and time again here on the channel. Jeff Jarrett as well. I think the two made a really funny tag team, a really good tag team. The New Age Outlaws were just kind of blossoming onto their own. Not really at this point. They were already kind of an established tag team by mid-1999, early 1999. But still, they're a really, really good tag team match. The New Age Outlaws coming out victorious as the new number one contenders to the tag team titles. Up next, Mankind versus Big Show in a Boiler Room Brawl. Kind of a backlash, no pun intended, from WrestleMania, the aftermath, where Mankind and Big Show face each other at WrestleMania 15 for the right to be the special guest referee in the main event between Austin and Rock, and their feud kind of carried over onto this pay-per-view. Only went about 7 or 8 minutes. I mean, it was different. It wasn't the most exciting match ever, but Boiler Room Brawls, involving the likes of Big Show, Mankind, and eventually Kane as well. I don't know how many Boiler Room Brawls there have been in WWE history, and I'm not even sure if this was the first one, but it was interesting. Like I said, it was not a great 5-star mat classic, but I thought it was a nice match. Something new, something innovative, something fresh. I thought it was something innovative, like I said before, something reinvigorating, I guess is the word that I'm looking for here. Something out of the ordinary, I guess is another way to describe it. So I enjoyed it for what it was. Mankind coming out victorious to end the feud, I believe. I don't know if it continued past this point, but Mankind giving Big Show his comeuppance here. Up next, in a little backlash from WrestleMania 15, Triple H taking on X-Pac, as if you can recall, it was at WrestleMania 15 where Triple H and China turned their backs on the rest of D-Generation X, Road Dogg, Billy Gunn, and X-Pac, and they would eventually be joined by Kane, and Kane would make his presence felt in this matchup, because remember, it was at WrestleMania 15 where Triple H faced Kane and lost by disqualification. Or maybe it was, I believe Triple H lost that match by DQ after using a steel chair, which was pretty weird. But Kane would get involved in this matchup, take out Triple H, but that would not prevent him from winning this contest. Chyna getting her, making her presence felt in this matchup as well, helping Triple H pick up the victory after laying out X-Pac with a pedigree. So a pretty good matchup, had a lot of good story behind it, given the history between the two. Remember, it was only a year prior that the two, formed their version of D-Generation X. So for what it was, that it was a good matchup. Not the greatest 5-star mat classic, but it was good for what it was. Had the story behind it, the involvement with Kane and Chyna. It made sense. It was not your random interference of the Attitude Era that it was known for, and just random people coming out and just attacking each other. In this respect, it made sense. Kane and Triple H had faced each other at WrestleMania. Did not stop Triple H from winning, and he was the right person to go over here. He was the one with the brighter future, of course. X-Pac, never a bad talent, but it was kind of a mid-carder for life. And you look at the rest of the clique, too, it's just kind of funny. You have Triple H and Nash and HBK and Scott Hall, and then there's X-Pac. I mean, he's a good talent and all, but he was not on the same level as all the other guys I just mentioned, but a good match there. Up next, The Undertaker versus Ken Shamrock in what was not a very good matchup. Got a lot of time, almost 19 to 20 minutes. Just not a very good match at all. It's just pretty boring. The people didn't really care for it. Mostly consisting of submission holds, and I know that's what Ken Shamrock was kind of known for. but his style just did not mesh well with that of The Undertaker's. And like I said before, Ryan Shamrock, who had been the centerpiece, the focal point of the Intercontinental Championship picture around this period in time, was, I believed, to have been kidnapped by the Ministry of Darkness, henceforth why Ken Shamrock was going after The Undertaker, who was a main component of the Ministry of Darkness. So that match, it made sense. I mean, that was the build-up behind this bout, but the match itself was pretty boring. The Undertaker came out victorious, and that was pretty much it. It was not a terrible match. It was just very, very boring, and their styles just did not mesh. They're great in their own, respectively, just together. They're not the greatest, pairing. They don't have the greatest chemistry, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And when I was watching this, I had completely forgotten. I believe this was Ken Shamrock, not his final pay-per-view, but he wasn't in the WWE for very long, so maybe it was one of his final matches. I don't remember the exact month in which he left the WWE, but he did not go out in the best of style. This match was not great. So like I said, I always loved Ken Shamrock. I thought he was a great talent. Could he have been a world champion in WWE? It doesn't remain to be seen because it's not happening, of course. But during that time, I think he's just kind of the right player at the wrong time with Austin and Rock and Taker and Triple H and all these other guys. He was never going to get the chance to be a world champion, but he was a nice undercard act as Intercontinental Champion. And the second to last match in this pay-per-view, which is saying something how much they saw him as a top guy, even though he never really was a main event level talent. Still, it was fine for what it was. Like I said, a pretty boring bout. Not the greatest match that either guy has had in WWE from what I've seen, and it just didn't really, serve its purpose as the second to last match. It was probably, if anything, it kind of served as a filler bout. It did not deserve to go 19-20 minutes. But it brought down the crowd after the Triple H X-Pac match and before getting them revved up for the main event between Austin and Rock. So at least it did serve some sort of a purpose between Triple H and X-Pac in the main event. So we get to the main event. Speaking of such, Stone Cold Steve Austin defending his newly won WWE Championship against The Rock in a no-holds-barred match with Shane McMahon as the special guest referee. And the matches between Austin and Rock, it's funny because Austin, people have said, in years past, and which it is true, his wrestling style is kind of more brawl-oriented after the neck injury. Like I said, which is very much true, but that didn't make his matches with Rock any less great. That goes without saying. This matchup was a prime example of that. And like I mentioned, WrestleMania 15, to me, not the greatest WrestleMania. They had a common theme in building around D-Generation X and getting back together and splitting up, all this other bullshit. And, that was mainly the central theme of that show other than Rock and Austin in the main event. And that was kind of the saving grace of the show, Rock and Austin in the main event. And I thought this was not the saving grace of the show because this is a really, really good pay-per-view, but it was the perfect way to cap it off. For the WWE title, you have all your different factors involved in, and it was the epitome of what the Attitude Era was known for, with all the interference from Shane and Vince and everyone else, kind of a hardcore brawl with Rock taking out. I think it was on this show. I think it was actually the following year. I think I'm thinking about the following year, and I'll get to that when I do tomorrow, my review of Backlash 2000, so I won't mention it here. But both guys look great here. A lot of interference, but not in a bad way, like, more interference. It just added to the chaotic feel of this matchup. And with Rock and Austin and the feud just kind of fueling up and becoming more personal, with Rock taking Austin's the cross-skull belt and whatever it's called, the Steve Austin belt. It felt personal, and the match reflected that. Got a lot of good time, went about 17 or 18 minutes. Probably should have gone longer than the Taker and Ken Shamrock match. It wasn't, a huge difference in time, but it could have easily gone a few more minutes. But for what it was, though, a great, excellent main event. A lot of excitement. People were, out of their seats for this matchup, on the edge of their seat, if not out of their seats for this bout. People just going crazy. Austin over like a motherfucker. Rock was great as well in his respective role. All the interference from I almost said the Authority, from the McMahons was also really well done, so it didn't feel bogged down. But in the end, Stone Cold Steve Austin hitting Rock with a Stone Cold Stunner before laying him out with the championship belt right to the skull, picking up the 1-2-3 to retain his WWE title. So a fantastic main event. Really, really enjoyed it. And that was a great way of going off the show. It was, like I said, you think of the Attitude Era, you think of Austin versus McMahon and Austin versus Rock in this pay-per-view. This main event had both of those things, with Austin overcoming the odds and retaining the title. So I thought it was a great main event, another awesome match in these series of contests between Austin and Rock during the Attitude Era. So great stuff to close off the show. On the whole, I thought it was a really exciting show. Maybe that's because WrestleMania 15 was just not great in my opinion. Did not really enjoy it other than that main event of that show. So maybe just in retrospect, that's why I enjoyed it more than I did. More as much as I did, because WrestleMania 15, in my opinion, was very, very flat. But, the show on the whole, this one, there were a few clunkers here and there. Undertaker and Shamrock was pretty boring. The IC title match was short and unspectacular, but it wasn't, terrible, though. There was no match in the show that was, had me rolling my eyes. So, for that purpose alone, I thought it was a really, really good show with a lot of exciting action. Triple H and X-Pac. The Mankind and Big Show matchup was kind of something new. The hardcore matchup was pretty fun. And the opener, the 6-man tag team match, was also very fun as well. New Age Outlaws versus Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett, a good tag team match in the middle of the show. So on the whole, I thought it was a really good show. Definitely check it out if you're going to be watching old Backlash pay-per-views. For the rest of the month of April, I would definitely start with this one. Backlash 1999 in your house. Really, really good show. Would definitely recommend it. Watching it back on the WWE Network. So, of course, guys, as always, thank you for supporting WrestleRant, the channel, and everything else. Make sure to share, subscribe, like, and comment. All support and feedback is greatly appreciated. You can find me on Facebook at Graham Juice Matthews. The link is down below, along with my Twitter handle at WrestleRant. Make sure to tweet at me for any suggestions or feedback and stuff like that. Always appreciate it, like I said before. Have a great weekend, guys, and I'll speak with you guys tomorrow with my review of Backlash 2000.